So, Exposure Magazine it started 6 years ago, 2013. I literally was in Atlanta, Georgia, working for Bravo as a public relations consultant. And so I was working on some campaigns and getting some stuff together for Dwight Eubanks. And I ran into Ed Hartwell, who is an NFL player. And so he had introduced me to some other players who had issues with concussions and things of that nature. And so some of those players picked me up as their publicist, and I began to try to push their content out to European networks, whether it be magazines, television networks, whatever, right? And so needless to say, their stories were not very, they weren't picked up. And I was thinking like, wow, you know, these guys are out here suffering after, you know, playing the American football game, and nobody wants to hear their stories. So I said, you know what? And then there was other celebs or minorities that I represented, and there was so much pushback in that industry that I decided, you know what, I'm going to create an application or magazine just as sophisticated as Vogue, as beautiful as, you know, any other, you know, Rob Report or, you know, some of the other mainstream publications that are out there. Same aesthetics, everything. And so that portion of my life came from following my mom. My mom is a Pan-Africanist, and so she consistently taught us the value of being innovative. And so that is where it came from. And then it was also just learning about how the archives of real good content that was related to African Americans, like the massacre in 1921 that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it's not in history books about how amazing African Americans are and were, you know, because I don't look at the narrative of them saying we went over to Africa and brought back slaves. I look at it and say, no, they stole doctors, nurses, attorneys, and innovators. And so those stories of today's Martin Luther Kings and Coretta Scotts and amazing people need to be told. So Exposure Magazine is about archiving the stories of amazing people who are going through whatever it takes to make their dream come true. And so I'm going through whatever it takes to make my dream come true. And Exposure Magazine is that. It is the foundation of collecting content about amazing people. And I know I can do it. I know that it's been done, and that this isn't something that I think that we should overlook in society, is making sure that we archive our stories so that our children would be able to read them later, you know. So the content in Exposure Magazine, you can look at it 10 years from now and it still would be relevant.